Takashi Komuro is a high school boy depressed over his crush Rei Miyamoto, who rejected his confession, and who is closer to his friend Hisashi Aigu. His friend Saya Takagi calls him an idiot and to concentrate on school. After she leaves, he watches as a mysterious man attacks and bites their gym teacher at the front of the school, and then watches as the teacher turns into a zombie. He quickly runs into his classroom to try to flee with Rei, telling them that people have been killed at the school gate. Hisashi grabs some weapons, which Takashi says he will not need because he knows martial arts. Meanwhile, nerd Kohta Hirano and Saya Takagi also attempt to escape. Over the school intercom orders the students to evacuate the school before the speaker is killed by zombies. The students immediately panic and a large crowd tries to escape the school. Takashi and his friends run into their teacher Wakasaka, and they manage to save Rei from their teacher, but Hisashi is bitten in the process. They retreat to the roof where they see that their city has become devastated. They see that zombies have overrun the school, and that Hisashi will soon be turned from his bite. Hisashi wishes to die before he can turn, but Rei prevents this, and Takashi is later forced to eliminate his friend. Saddened over Hisashi's death, Rei lashes out at Takashi but then apologizes to him, begging him to stay with her. Saya and Hirano are stuck inside the school building and have no idea where to go. Hirano suggests they go to the teacher's room, but the teachers there have already turned. Saya calls him chubby and orders them to move. Meanwhile on the roof, Rei's father is a police officer, so they call him, but her father tells her that the city is lost, and they need to retreat immediately. The undead surround them, so they decide to use a water hose to flee. Hirano and Saya talk about the seriousness of their situation, and Saya believes that Japan has been quickly overwhelmed by the large number of zombies even if the military acts. Meanwhile in the nurse's office, the nurse Shizuka is unable to contact emergency services and wonders what to do. Her student assistant Kazu defends her, but she doesn't remember what his name is before he gets overwhelmed. The zombies surround her until she is saved by Saeko, the captain of the kendo club. She commends Kazu for his bravery and offers to kill him so he doesn't turn, and Kazu accepts. At the school workshop, Hirano's cowardly personality changes as he finds a nail gun and he constructs a makeshift rifle. Soon undead break into the workshop to attack Saya, but Hirano is able to shoot them with his nail gun. Saya and Hirano also experiment with the undead and find that the zombies only react to sound. Takashi and Rei use the water hose to clear out the undead, and they plan to go back to their houses and to help survivors along the way. As they run into the building, Saeko and Shizuka also arrive to see Saya kill a zombie attacking her with a drill. The six of them decide they need to leave the campus. However, they watch over the news that not only their city but the entire world has become overwhelmed by the undead. The survivors discuss the possibility that the zombies might decay after a few weeks, and they decide to fight their way through the horde into the city. Meanwhile, they run into other students and save them from zombies. Saya tells them her theory that the zombies only react to sound, and Takashi volunteers to test this theory, which is successful. They retreat to the school gate with the other survivors, but the other students accidentally make a sound, causing the zombies to descend upon the students. Fighting through the horde, the survivors are able to get into a school bus when they see the teacher Shido, and several students also trying to escape the school. But when nobody is watching, Shido kicks a fallen student into the zombies to distract them. After the survivors get to the bus, Shizuka is able to drive through the school gate, and they all escape the campus. Shido tells the group that they need to elect a leader, and it should be him. Meanwhile, as the bus heads into the city, the group starts to argue with each other because some of the students preferred to stay at the school. Rei defends Takashi against a loud student, and Shido is able to use the situation to become leader using the majority votes of students on the bus. Rei angrily leaves the bus and Takashi goes after her, but they become separated from the group when a bus filled with zombies crashes and traps them in a tunnel. Takashi tells Saeko they will meet up later, and Rei saves him when he is attacked by a biker zombie. Using the zombie's bike, they make their way into the city. They see that the city has become devastated but deserted as the zombies have run off to chase other survivors. And at a police crash they find some weapons. At a gas station they have an argument about Hisashi, and Takashi leaves to clear his head, but later finds a thug holding Rei captive. In the standoff, Takashi rushes the thug and is able to use the gun to kill him and save Rei, and they leave the thug to the zombies. On the runway at Kansai Airport, a plane is becoming surrounded by zombies on the runway. Providing overwatch for the plane, Rika Minami and her squad help to clear the zombies, allowing the plane to take off. She speaks with her partner and tells him that she has a friend working as a nurse at the school, who is Shizuka. Meanwhile at the bus, the students wait to be evacuated, and Shido uses the time to preach to the students. As Hirano and Saya watch the evacuation, Saya determines that the authorities must be evacuating the population to remote areas like Hokkaido, but that at some point these places might become overrun even if they are protected by the military. Takashi and Rei travel through the city, which has descended into chaos, filled with survivors that have gone crazy and who try to attack them. Although they manage to make it to the bridge, they see that it has become way too crowded for them to evacuate. On the bridge, civilians try to skip the line and the police use water hoses to push them off the bridge. And inside the bus, while Shido is brainwashing the other students, Saeko, Shizuka, Saya, and Hirano bond over their life stories. They share plans to leave the group as their own team, but Shido refuses Shizuka to leave because of her medical skills. However, Hirano fires a warning shot against Shido, ordering him to let them go. The group make their way by foot off the bridge but are ambushed by zombies, and hearing their gunshots, Takashi makes a risky jump with the bike to help their friends. Fully reunited, Takashi gives Hirano the real gun and the survivors eliminate the rest of the zombies. Shizuka tells them her friend Rika's place is nearby, so they go there to rest. At Rika's apartment, they take the opportunity to clean themselves and recover from their journey, and inside the apartment they find that Rika is a gun nut and has tons of weapons stored away. Hirano is ecstatic to see all the equipment and reveals to Takashi that he used to live in America and was trained in firearms by a former soldier. Later that night, Takashi watches the bridge, worried that the civilians are making too much noise during the evacuation. The policemen running the evacuation have lost contact with their headquarters and have been ordered to do anything to keep order. A group of civilians start to protest at the barricades and against the government, as zombies start to overwhelm the police line protecting the evacuation effort. Soon the protesters and the police turn violent. Watching the scene from their TV, Takashi and Hirano agree that they need to leave the city as soon as possible. Takashi later comforts Rei over their situation and meets Saeko, who is cooking for them in the kitchen. He later argues with Rei, who is upset about their situation and the death of Hisashi. Takashi tells her to stop bringing up the death of his best friend and that they need to make the most out of their situation. Meanwhile, the situation on the bridge has turned dire as bulldozers are used to break the barricades and the police start to lose control over the situation. The situation at the apartment worsens as well, as a barking dog accidentally draws the attention of a large horde to the survivors. The group watches from the balcony as survivors are killed in the streets, and Takashi wants to help, but Saeko tells him not to draw attention and to be realistic. Takashi watches as a man and his daughter attempt to find shelter, but when they try to enter a house, the man is killed by a scared family. The girl cries over her father's death, and the sound attracts zombies to her location. Hirano refuses to do nothing and begins to open fire, and Takashi goes into the apartment to tell the group he will try to rescue a little girl outside the apartment. The girls agree and help Takashi leave the barricaded apartment. Takashi takes the bike and makes it to the little girl, who is defended by a small dog. He fights off the zombies with Hirano's help, and he and the little girl, whose name is Alice, give her father a small funeral. Meanwhile, the girls and Hirano have found a military Humvee in Rika's garage, but have to find a way to get to Takashi and Alice safely. They watch as Takashi carries Alice and the dog on top of the neighborhood wall to avoid the zombies. The group arrives just in time to charge through the zombies with the Humvee, as Takashi starts to attract the attention of the zombies, and Takashi with Alice are able to leap into the Humvee to safety. The next day, the survivors use the aquatic abilities of the Humvee to cross the river. After they cross, they use the opportunity to rest and to change into new clothes from the apartment. They also name the dog Zeke, and Hirano tries to teach Takashi how to use a rifle. But when they explore the other side of the river, they see that zombies seem to have crossed the bridge as well. They discuss their next options, and they will try to visit their homes looking for survivors, with Takashi telling Saya that her parents are probably alright. The city seems to be deserted, and Takashi is worried about the lack of military planes and helicopters. They accidentally run into a horde of zombies, and the Humvee crashes into a barricade. Rei becomes thrown off the Humvee and hurts her leg. The survivors try to cover for her as a large group of undead descend upon them, with Takashi and Hirano using rifles while Saeko fights with her sword. But even as Saya picks up a rifle to help them, the situation starts to grow dire as they run out of bullets. Takashi resorts to using the gun as a blunt instrument. The survivors are about to be overwhelmed when a group of armed firefighters arrive to save them. Amongst the firefighters is Saya's mother, and while the group is rescued, Saeko and Takashi go off on their own to check up on her house. Since they have to cross the river again, the pair steal a jeep from a nearby garage to be able to cross the water safely. While traveling, they decide to take a break on an island in the river, and Saeko and Takashi grow closer as they talk about their high school crushes. After they fully cross the river, they arrive at the overwhelmed part of the city and use the jeep as a distraction for the zombies to be able to carve a path through the horde. But Saeko freezes up because she is unable to fight against undead children. They retreat into her shrine, and Saeko is deeply disturbed over seeing the zombified children. That night they talk about their experiences, and Saeko admits that in the past she used her sword skills to fight off an attacker and she secretly enjoyed violence. When they leave the shrine the next day, they must fight through a horde of undead, and Takashi promises to support her, which inspires Saeko again to fight against the zombies. They later make it to Saya's house and reunite with the rest of the group. Although the survivors are able to relax at Takagi's mansion, they notice, because they are young, the rest of the survivors there are treating them like children. Saya also argues with her mother, so she goes to check up on Hirano, who is working on his weapons, and she tells him that this refuge is temporary, and that they will need to find permanent shelter eventually. The group later meet up, and Takashi compliments Saya's family on their rescue operation. However, Saya points out that her family only protected themselves and their subordinates, and Takashi scolds her for being ungrateful. They apologize to each other when they hear that Saya's father has arrived. They watch as her father executes a former ally turned into an undead in front of the civilians to demonstrate the gravity of their situation, ordering them to fight or they will not survive. Takashi worries that the situation at the Takagi compound is too comfortable for the civilians, and that a mutiny or rebellion might happen because of Takagi's tight grip of control over the compound. Meanwhile, Hirano is bullied by other survivors because he will not give up the large amount of weapons he has to the rest of the group. Saya's parents arrive and ask Hirano to give up his weapons, but Takashi arrives to insist that his friend should be able to keep his firearms as he used them to protect Saya, and the rest of the group insists that Hirano is better with all of his weapons. Meanwhile, Shido has fully brainwashed his group of survivors, and they begin tossing students who disagree with them out of the bus to be eaten by zombies. Meanwhile, Saya and Takashi argue with civilians in the compound over the undead. The civilians don't believe that the city has fallen to zombies and start to argue with them, calling them high school kids addicted to power. Saya is angry at their response, but Hirano tries to explain that they must be very frightened of the situation and trying to act like the world is still normal. Meanwhile, Saeko meets with Saya's father, who praises her father's swordsmanship. Since Saeko saved Saya's life in their escape from the school, he gives her a legendary sword, and Saeko promises to protect Saya. That evening, Rei and Takashi speak to each other about their journey, and Rei confesses that she has started to have feelings for him. They share a moment until Rei leaves, and sees Saeko waiting outside, where they exchange uncertain words over their feelings for Takashi. Shido and his students have also arrived at the barricade and are granted shelter. Takashi later meets with Saya's father, who tells him that the compound will leave the metro area in a couple days to a safer place. But when Shido enters the compound, Rei immediately attacks him because Shido used his power of grades to blackmail students and cause her family suffering. Saya's father defends Rei and allows Rei to execute Shido, but Rei decides to spare the teacher, and Shido with his students are exiled from the compound. Meanwhile, up in space, astronauts watch in horror as the remaining governments of the world start to bomb the cities in an effort to combat the undead. Some warships attempt to stop the missiles launched by the submarines, but due to their crew being filled with zombies, are unable to stop a missile headed towards Japan. The missile blows up in the atmosphere, but discharges a massive EMP field that causes electronic equipment to fail. Rika, who is at the airport, is calling Shizuka to see if she is alright, and their call is cut off when the EMP wave hits. The wave disrupts Shido's bus and he crashes it into a barricade, and the outer defenses of the Takagi estate start to fall. Saya explains without the electronic defenses the survivors will have trouble fending off the zombies, and Saya's father orders the gate to the estate closed to save the survivors inside. But the horde begins to break through the gate and sweep into the compound, quickly overrunning the civilians in the estate. Takashi and his group fight against the undead, but even though they eliminate many undead, the estate becomes lost as the remaining survivors retreat to the mansion. Saya's father orders the survivors to retreat to the mansion next door, but he tells Takashi to take his group and go their own way, as Saya will be safer in a smaller group. Saya refuses to leave her parents, but they insist that she flee with her friends. The survivors fight and make their way towards the garage, as Saya's parents lead their forces to draw the zombies away from the students. At the garage, their Humvee has been repaired, and they manage to break out from the horde and flee into the outskirts of the city. And this is all for this video. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.